Two all-new, never-before-heard, dog-headed creature narratives sent in to us anonymously by you, our viewers. We've got this crazy account of seeing a Native American shaman with a Dogman in the Walmart, which starts at that time shown on screen. But first we're going to tell you this reminiscence of a Dogman haunting a summer camp a number of years ago, and we call that one Summer Camp Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, my Romany aunt, who I'll call Matilda as a personal in-joke, used to always warn me of the werewolf, which was something I didn't believe in at the time. Aunt Matilda was not a superstitious woman. She was as much of a realist as a person could be, and always spoke in a practical, no-nonsense tone. But when the subject of werewolves came up, her voice adopted a mystical and mysterious air, and she'd start to talk a little like a character in some old horror movie. Aunt Matilda had grown up around the Romany, who looked upon werewolves as something more than just dangerous monsters. They viewed them as a source of power and spiritual danger. Although I have Romany blood flowing through my veins as well, I have little to no knowledge of the mysteries. So I'm only describing what I remember seeing happen back then. Aunt Matilda began her lesson on werewolves with a simple warning: stay away from them and never anger them. But when I asked how dangerous werewolves really were, she took on a serious tone and described what could happen if a werewolf were actually successful in attacking a person. To be attacked by a werewolf can result in death, Aunt Matilda told me. But more insidious than that is the fact that if a werewolf kills you, it can drag your soul to hell, and that's an eternity of torment. Aunt Matilda's words were chilling, but she also had a few pointers on how to prevent an attack. The most important thing to remember, she told me, is that werewolves come out at night. So, if it's dark, it's wise to stay close to home and avoid wandering around outside. Stockpile wolfsbane plants around your house, and carry a cross and some holy water to ward them off if you must go out. But Aunt Matilda told me, looking me straight in the eye, that the best protection against the creatures would be to keep my silver pendant around my neck. I told her that I didn't have a silver pendant, and then she gave me a silver St. Christopher pendant to wear around my neck for protection. I promised her I would do that, and I meant it, but mostly just because I thought the pendant was cool. Like I think I said, I didn't really believe in werewolves, so I didn't care about any of the rest of it. Once I had the pendant around my neck, she told me this story, which she claimed was about a necklace pendant just like mine. As I recall, it went something like this. It was a hectic night, and the wind howled through the trees. The full moon was shining brightly in the sky, and its eerie rays shone through the windows of the old farmhouse. Inside the farmhouse, a family was tucked away in their beds, trying to get some sleep. But they weren't alone. Outside, in the shadows of the night, something was lurking. It was the dreaded werewolf, an ancient creature that hunted on the night of the full moon. It had roamed the countryside for centuries, and its presence was feared by all. This werewolf had a fierce canine head, and it walked like a man, towering at least 9 feet tall. Its eyes gleamed a golden yellow in the light of the moon. Long jagged claws curved from its fingertips, and long fangs jutted from a dog mouth that drooled onto the ground as he walked. The werewolf crept closer and closer to the farmhouse, its eyes glowing in the darkness. It knew that its prey was inside, and it was more than ready to strike. Suddenly the werewolf howled, its cry echoing through the night. The family inside the farmhouse shuddered with fear, and they all huddled together in their parents' bed. The family prayed that the werewolf would pass them by, but luck was not on their side. The werewolf had chosen its prey, and it was not about to leave without them. The oversized upright canine burst through the door and lunged at the family, but instead of attacking them, it stopped, and it bowed its head. It had been sent by the gods, and it was there to protect them. The family stared in wonder at the werewolf, and in that moment, the creature transformed into what looked like a beautiful woman. She smiled at them, and in her hand she held 4 silver necklaces. She told them that they were charms to keep them safe from all harm. The family thanked the woman for her gifts, and she disappeared into the night. From that day forward, whenever the night of the full moon arrived, the family would put on their silver charms and go to sleep with peace of mind. Nobody doubts that the werewolf continued to prowl, but it was never seen by the family again. The family still wears the silver charms to this day, and they tell the story of the werewolf to their children and their grandchildren. Then Aunt Matilda looked sad and said that since she had no grandchildren of her own, she wanted me to have the medallion to wear around my own neck to serve as a reminder of the power of the gods, and to know that no werewolf could ever come closer than 10 feet to me as long as I had it on. Well, I like that power of the gods part. It made me feel like a superhero or something. But I didn't really care about being protected from werewolves because I was a kid growing up in an apartment in Chicago. And to me, werewolves were fictional movie characters. You might as well protect me from Willy Wonka. That was how I felt in those days. I didn't say that to my aunt though, because I genuinely liked having and wearing the pendant and feeling like I was protected. So it was some years later when I was at summer camp the final year I went to it. I had started going as a kid, but by that point I was an older teenager, like 17 or 18. I must have been 18 now that I do the math, and I was a camp counselor by that point. One night, me and the other people my age put the younger ones to sleep and then wandered out to the lake to have some midnight swimming and smoking where we hoped nobody could see us. At some point, we took our outer clothes off and piled them up on rocks near the water. Then we all went for a cooling swim in our bathing suits that we wore under our clothes all summer. I took all my necklaces off because some of them were cheap. All of them except Aunt Matilda's, really. And I thought some of them might get rusty or even fall apart underwater. My protective medallion was left on shore, and I really wasn't even thinking about it. How often had I run into a werewolf while swimming in a lake? I had never run into a werewolf while swimming in a lake or doing anything else. So I joined my co-counselors in the water, and the 6 of us had a blast. For a while. One of the other girls screamed and pointed to land on the other side of the lake, opposite to the side we had entered from. At first I didn't see what she was upset about, but then I noticed a dark, scary form in the bushes. I couldn't tell if it was a man or an animal, but when it saw that it had been noticed, the shadow emerged into enough light that, well, I still couldn't tell if it was a man or an animal, because this was something that appeared to be walking on 2 legs as we humans do, but also seemed to be covered in dark fur like an animal. The head had tall pointed ears up on top, and the teeth were set in a long canine snout. But this guy had big muscle man arms and hands that ended in clawed fingers. It was neither man nor wolf, and yet it was both at the same time. I remember treading water for a few seconds, adding all these details up in my tired teenage stoner brain. And somehow, everything kept adding up to a werewolf. The monster that I didn't believe in, but that my Aunt Matilda kept telling me was real. But I was protected against werewolves, I thought. Instinctively, I reached for the medallion around my neck, the silver one that I had worn since I was a little kid. It wasn't there. Alarm shot through me as I remembered that I had left my necklaces on shore. Suddenly I felt a lot more concerned about that werewolf over there. I turned to look at him again, to gauge how far away he was. But I heard a splash, even before I could look. Now everyone was screaming, as the werewolf was already in the water with us. There was so much foam splashing and flying that I really couldn't see where I was even swimming to. I just trusted that everyone was heading back to their clothes, and that as long as I followed the splashing foam and the screaming, I'd get back to my medallion in time to save my life. I might not have ever believed in that medallion or werewolves before, but those were the only two things I did believe in during those horrible moments of swimming back to the rocky shoreline near our summer camp. I was not the first to get back to the rocks, but I was not the last. I saw this girl named Anna slip on the wet rocks and fall forward hard. She was lucky she didn't break her face, but she was crying anyway because that must have smarted really bad. I grabbed my necklaces and clothes and moved away as carefully as I could with them, not wanting to repeat Anna's mistake on the slippery rocks. When things calmed down and we all regrouped, nobody was sure where the werewolf had gone. It took us a little longer in our terrified stupor to do a head count and realize that one of the other girls named Sandy was missing. None of the boys wanted to go look for her alone, while Anna and I didn't want them leaving us alone. So the three of them walked us back to camp, then doubled back to go look for our lost coworker. Well, Sandy was never found, and that camp never managed to open up again for another season. There were lawsuits and legal cases, and the owners collapsed under the financial pressure. Parents started pulling their kids from the program, and there wasn't enough revenue coming in to fight the court cases, so the summer camp went out of business, and the woods fell back under the full control of the summer camp Dogman. And now for our second story, Dogman in the Walmart. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have a weird one for you. It's either about a dogman or a werewolf, but I guess I think this was a werewolf that we saw. It's a weird collection of facts I'm about to throw at you, so I hope you're strapped in. This ride is likely to get bumpy along the way. And now I'm a guy, so I'm a little embarrassed that my story is not about hunting or anything badass at all. My story is about shopping. But it is about shopping in a big box retail store. And some of those big boxes are kind of manly, so I guess there's that. Seriously, I like to think of myself as macho, but I really only am in video games. Same with my friend I'll call Roger. Now, he's a badass mofo in first-person shooters, but he's a pussycat IRL. The two of us started hanging out and going shopping together when we still lived with our parents, because when there were two of us, it cut down on the likelihood of us getting bullied at the mall or in the stores. Life isn't easy for skinny short guys like me and Roger. So now this is actually kind of a two-part story. We saw this dogman or werewolf or whatever it was more than one time, but there was a big distance in time between the two sightings. Now in both cases we came upon the creature after other people had started to gather in a crowd around it already. We never so far have gotten to see how this all begins. We've walked in while this show or event was already underway. For that reason, we both have to guess at parts that we don't really fully comprehend. Maybe if we saw it from the start, then it would have all made more sense. I'm just going to tell you what we remember, and maybe one of you out there will know what I'm talking about. Maybe one of you has seen these guys doing this thing in some place near you. Maybe you can fill in the gaps for us in the parts that make no sense from our perspective. So here's the way we remember it. We were shopping in the Walmart Supercenter by Alma, to the west of St. Louis, Michigan. Now this is not the country, but there is a small woods out behind the place. I wouldn't think that woods would be large enough to be a habitat for a carnivore as large as the one we saw, which I think adds to the circumstantial evidence that what we saw was a man who drove to that supercenter and then transformed into a werewolf. The idea of it just being an actual wild animal, whether Michigan Dogman or a mutant bear, seems to shrink when you consider the context. I mean, it looked like an animal, sure. It was covered in fur, it had no clothing, but it also didn't go wild and kill or eat anyone even as the crowd packed in tighter and tighter around it. So while it looked like a beast, its behavior was far too controlled for it to have been a wild animal. At the very least, it was a trained creature, but I think it was intelligent and capable of independent thought. I know its eyes did not look human, but they did look conscious and cognizant. For us, it started when Roger saw a crowd gathering near men's shoes, and he motioned for us to go over there. We walked up to the back of the crowd, but being shorter than most of the people there, it took us some time of working our way into the crowd before we could start to make out patches of what everyone was gathered to stare at. There seemed to be a heavy-set, white-haired Native American guy talking to a bear right there in the store. Judging by the coloring, I thought at first I was looking at the back of a grizzly bear, and I said exactly that to Roger. Someone else in the crowd told both of us, "That's no grizzly, son. That's a real Michigan Dogman." I looked again, and that Grizz did seem to have a very long snout on him, like a dog or a wolf would have. Whatever it was, the beast rose up to stand on his hind legs, and when he did so, he let out a long, deep howl that was so loud, ladies were putting their fingers in their ears, babies were crying, and big boxes started rattling on the vibrating shelves all around us. I started wondering if the whole building was going to collapse. It got that crazy in that place for a while. But when that howl was done, people clapped. They applauded, like the beast had just sung the national anthem or something. Like this was a show. Well, maybe it was. Roger and I pushed our way to the front of the crowd so that we could look for the zipper on the monster costume. I mean that both literally and figuratively. We were literally looking for zippers or signs that this was a costume and not a real Dogman. And we were looking for any other clues that would help us understand the true nature of whatever it was that we were seeing and hearing happen in that store. Now, there was this older white-haired fat guy wearing a Native American outfit of some kind. In fact, I just assumed the guy was Native because of the way he dressed, but his face looked Native as well. Now, he might have been acting and he might have been in costume, but as this was happening, I wasn't questioning that he was the guy that John Wayne would have called an American Indian back in the old days. That was because I was too focused on questioning whether that grizzly bear-looking Dogman was real or not. There were points where the white-haired chubby guy said things that the crowd would laugh at, or react to with gasps or surprised noises, but I don't think I ever made out one clear word that the guy was trying to tell us. Like, I kept thinking that he must be selling something, and sooner or later he'd pull out that product and make his hard sell, but he never did anything like that. He just kept seeming to be talking about this monster standing next to him, but I don't know what he was saying. Now, if that man was ever going to get around to making a sales pitch, it didn't happen on that day, as some people wearing vests came over pushing through the crowd and loudly insisting that the man and the monster had to leave the store immediately. People began pushing and shoving, and so Roger and I beat it out of there and went out front, waiting for the native guy and his monster to come out front so we could ask them some questions. Well, we stood there for an hour before the day started getting too hot, and we went back inside to do our shopping as we had originally intended. I'm not sure where the Dogman and his friend went, but we couldn't find them back in the store, where things seemed to have returned to normal. Now, we had nearly forgotten all about that day, when the two of us were out shopping with Roger's sister sometime afterward. She wanted to buy a bed for her new home, and she had hired the two of us to move the bed from the store to her new bedroom. I guess this was 7 or 8 months after the stuff I just told you about. So the three of us were in the Big Sandy Superstore just north of Cadillac, Michigan, looking at furniture, when we heard a familiar, deep-voiced howling emanating from the other side of the store. Roger and I looked at each other like it was Christmas, and we ran toward the sound of the howling, with Roger's sister running after us, asking us what the heck was going on. Well, sure enough, it was that big Dogman and his native friend again. Although the native's beard was shorter and he was just wearing a t-shirt that time, not some fancy Native American kind of outfit like last time. By the time we spotted them, there was already a crowd gathered, and there were already store employees ushering them out of the store, heading away from us. Roger and I were discussing ways we might be able to cut around the crowd and get a second chance to speak to that native man, asking him about the big werewolf. But Roger's sister reminded us that we weren't just doing her a favor. We were getting paid by the hour to help her. So remembering that we were on the clock, we sadly had to watch the Dogman and his native friend walk out of our lives a second time, and then we got back to moving furniture. When that job was done, Roger and I hopped on the internet and searched for any pics or mentions of what had happened that day. We also searched for any video or images or anything about our first sighting at Walmart, but nothing came up. There were so many people in both places, I refused to believe that nobody in either store uploaded any images of either event. We must not be using the correct search terms, that's all I can figure. So that's when we came up with the idea of sending our experience to you, just in case someone in your audience might know more about this than we do. If so, please leave your info in the comments, as Roger and I really still don't know exactly what that was that we saw in either event. For vitamin K, you want watercress. For executive producer, you want CS. Please join me in thanking today's executive producer, CS, for making this episode possible. In addition to being a channel member, CS donates to the Bigfoot Breakfast Fund at paypal.me/PeterBernard209, which is money that gets through to me in seconds and goes directly toward food and supplies needed in the moment. If it weren't for CS and a few others keeping us alive this way, I don't think we'd still even be online doing new shows. So please recognize the contributions of CS if you like what we do. And if you'd like to join her in helping us stay online, there are a few different ways that you can help. Here to explain them in simple language even a Bigfoot like me can understand is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.